Thank you very much, John. My name is Eamon Treanor, and I was born too many years ago than I care to remember. Grew up in Dundalk, and in our family there were 5 children. The eldest is Down syndrome, and the third child, I suppose, and the first son of the family. And growing up, that always had some kind of expectations at the back of it that I didn't kind of understand, but there was stuff going on in the background. And just giving you a little bit of my own biography, I was wondering in my teenage years what I was going to do with life. And my father died when I was 12, and that had a big impact on my life. And when I was coming to deciding what I would do with my life, the priesthood seemed to be calling. So I went to Maynooth. And despite many attempts to get thrown out, I was ordained for the priesthood in 1979. My first appointment was in the parish of Mail outside Drogheda. And then I was in South Armagh in the parish of Drumatee for 6 years. And thinking about that, lately, and the impact of being a curate who felt very much alone in South Armagh during the time of the hunger strikes and all kinds of stuff going on, and dealing with, occasionally kidnapping, very often shootings and bombs and stuff like that. We didn't have the same resources for healing as perhaps are available nowadays. It's just part of my biographical history. And I just wonder sometimes about the impact of all of that. And it's important, to talk about it at some times or other. After Drumatee, I came back to the parish that I'm actually in now, and was a curate there for 7 years. I went back north to the Loop in County Derry and Moneymore. At the time when there was that spate of tit-for-tat killings at the end of the Troubles. And again, that was a terrible time. And in that particular situation, the parish priest that I had was a chronic alcoholic. God love him and God bless him. So there was no support there either. After that, I came back to RD and went to Cullen. And about 12 years ago, I reached my rock bottom in terms of misuse of alcohol. And thankfully, through the AA program, Alcoholics Anonymous, and the help of God, I'm here alive today and reasonably well. I can't say that I'm completely sane. I won't claim sanity at all, but we're here. One of the things I want to say about that is, to all of the young people especially, you don't necessarily have to go down that road. And if you find yourself having physical, emotional, spiritual problem at any time in your life, get help before you reach crisis point. And there are so many helps available. And one of the wonderful things about the IBDI initiative is that it's signposting what's going on to help. In recovery, one of the things that I have become convinced about is the necessity of prayer and developing our own spirituality. And integrating that into whatever parish groups we have. and saying, this is what we're about. So today I want to begin by talking a little about the spiritual experience of prayer, and then to look at the 12 steps and say, how might these be a model for parish initiatives, or indeed any group, or any individual? How does this thing work? And some years ago, a Jesuit called Thomas Green wrote a book called When the Well Runs Dry. Some of you may have heard of it, some of you may have read it. And it's about our experience of relationship, and particularly relationship with God in prayer. When you go to the well with your bucket to draw water out of the well, it's a lot of hard work for a little return. It's a lovely pump, isn't it? I don't know, is it working now? As things developed in life, man got a pump so that the water from the well flowed a bit more freely. So with less work, there was greater return. As when you visit a river or a stream, the water's just flowing. And sometimes an experience we have most often in Ireland, you can't see it too clearly there, but it just rains. And Thomas Green would talk about that as being in ecstasy. We wouldn't, of course, with our experience of rain. But if you're somebody who lives in the dry places, a desert country, the experience of rainfall and the refreshing and all of that brings is absolutely wonderful. Of course, in the desert, sometimes the well runs dry. And in your own personal lives, in your parish groups, whatever they're like, there are times when you might feel so frustrated or so empty that God doesn't appear to be there. When the well runs dry, according to Thomas Green, is the time to sit down and to wait, to be silent, and to wonder. And as they say very often in the rooms of AA, these things will pass. And we get other experiences and visions of water and the well. Talking about prayer and talking about spirituality and talking about religion, I think it's important to recognize that they're different. And everybody is called to be spiritual in some sense. Because on the day we're baptized, particularly when we're anointed with oil, it opens up or greases the life of the Spirit that dwells in us. Then when we're confirmed, it celebrates its maturity. In marriage, the couple are invited to be actively engaged in each other's spiritual growth and so on. What do we mean about spirituality? Spirituality, according to de Mello, is about waking up. He tells a story about a teacher. I'll tell it a little bit differently. An old man is in the house Sunday morning, calling his son, "Jaime, wake up, it's time to go to Mass." "Papa, I don't want to go to Mass." "Wake up, it's time to go to Mass." "It's so boring. And the kids make fun of me. I prefer to stay here." Papa says, 3 reasons why you should get up and go to Mass. Number 1, it's your duty. Number 2, you're 50 years of age. Number 3, you're the parish priest. Wake up. Spirituality is about waking up. And much of what the IBDI is waking up. It's awareness. I cannot address an issue in my life or in my community or in my parish or whatever until I first wake up to the reality that it's there. Okay? Yeah. And the first step of the 12 steps of the AA program, which has been adopted by very many recovery groups, and it's not necessarily a cure-all for everybody, but it does have a lot of common sense and a lot of value that many of us can share. The first step is we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. And I just want to focus on the word powerless for a moment, because there are so many things in our lives over which we have no power whatever. If you're sick, and I'll ask the ladies to excuse me before I say this, if you're sick and you have diarrhea, there's absolutely nothing you can do to stop it. Powerless. And that's only one small example. I'm powerless at any given time about how I feel, what my emotions are. I'm completely powerless about what other people think of me or say about me. And there are so many things. But for the alcoholic or the drug addict, they're powerless over a substance which robs them of their freedom, spiritually, physically, and emotionally. And until we admit there's a problem, there's no going forward. So until communities admit there's a problem in our parish community, this stuff's going on, big time. Let's get at it. Came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore us to sanity. When the writers of the big book, the 12 steps, the first 100, talk about a power greater than themselves, the power they speak about is the one true God of the Judeo-Christian tradition. However, as time went on, they came to realize that it's important for individuals to recognize and to name your own power, how you worship God. And it's not the same for everybody, and it's not even the same for everybody in the Catholic Church. Our image of God is unique to us, and it's valid. What the Church gives us is ritual, and what the Church gives us is dogma, and most importantly, what the church gives us is stories about Jesus Christ, who is and was the one individual who's totally awake. So came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. I told you earlier on I was insane. And, just keep that in mind all the time. And insanity runs riot, particularly when we're dealing with addictive situations. And the third step is to make a decision, nothing more. Just to make a decision. To turn our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. And that means, and it's a frightening thing really when you actually get down to do it, to get down on your knees and put your hands and your whole life totally at the mercy of God. And some people might argue that it's giving away your freedom. And it's not. The experience is that when you put your life totally in the hands of God, you become freer than possibly you've ever been in the world, in your life. And so the first 3 steps are what I call the foundation, the building blocks. It's like a 3-legged stool, and a 3-legged stool, as you know, will collapse if one of the legs is missing. And so I'm saying that for a parish initiative, one of the important things is to say there's a problem, admit. We come to believe that a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. And that's part of what we're doing today. Because all of the sharing today is about how individuals and communities contribute to healing each other's lives and restoring our parish groups or communities to sanity. And then the group makes a decision. And I hope that decision will include in our weekly meetings or however often we meet to find time for prayer. And as John said at the very beginning, I lit 3 candles here and have a wee sacred space. The candles remind me of the Trinity, Father, Son and Spirit, 3 persons, one God. The cross representing, as he said, St. Bridget. We're gathered on St. Bridget's Day. Bridget, as some of you may know, is the patron of victims of, in particular, parental abuse and male parental abuse. And there are hints in her own life story that she may have been a victim of abuse. And so many addicts of one kind or another are victims of abuse. And talking about victim, one of the things we must never do, either as a victim or somebody going through healing, is to get into the language of blame. Because when we get into the language of blame, there's no move towards forgiveness. So we'll come towards that later on. The foundation. If our group hasn't got a firm foundation, it won't thrive. And part of the foundation, in my view, is to have a prayer life, a spiritual life. The next step, the 4th step, is making a searching and fearless moral inventory. And you can liken that to what's come up in a few of the presentations today as a needs assessment. Being absolutely honest and truthful, first of all, about what's going on in our own lives, and secondly, what's happening out there. I had 2 burials this year in the parish, 2 young women who died as a result of heroin addiction. And the emotional impact on their families and also on a small community is so sad, and it's so unnecessary. How can we help avoid that in the future? Fearless moral inventory. Look at everything. Look at all the, I won't say the word, horse manure. And then the next thing to do is to admit to God, to ourselves, and to one other human being the exact nature of our wrongs. And I would say for anybody growing up in relationships, that's an important thing to do from time to time with your spiritual advisor, with your best friend, with your mentor, or somebody, to be totally honest about yourself. But be careful who you choose. Choose somebody whom you know will not judge you in any way. Some of our pastors are good at that. Some of our religious sisters are far better at that than we are. And can I say, the church at the moment owes a wonderful sense of gratitude to the work of the religious sisters in the whole area of recovery. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of characters when we make a moral inventory. It's like in a shop, stock taking, putting on one side all the good things about myself, putting on the other side all the bad things about myself, and seeking to work on the good stuff and slowly pare off the bad stuff later on in step 9 by making amends. But our greatest failures, if you like, tell us what our character defects are. And our character defects, in spiritual terms, are what keep us from being fully human. Like one of the big character defects among most addicts is procrastination. What's procrastination? I said, I'll tell you next week. Putting off till tomorrow what I ought to do today. So we become aware of our character defects, and we choose to try and do something about it. And again, we turn to God in prayer, down on our knees, humbly ask God to do it. And I sometimes wonder about, as a priest celebrating Mass more often, we don't get on our knees as often as the ordinary parishioner does. And it's something that we have to think about. As parish priest of RD says quite regularly, get down on your knees and thank God you're on your feet. humbling ourselves before our God, knowing where we are. By the way, working a program like this, when you get back off your knees, you start taking the shortcomings back again. It's not that simple. We have to keep working at it. So the first action part is making a fearless moral inventory, needs assessment, admitting to God, to ourselves and another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs. We're entirely ready to have God remove the defects, humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. Made a list of all the persons we harmed, became willing to make amends to them all. Something we have to do. And that's something that most people do naturally. If we're not insane, if we're not sick. Oh, I've hurt them in one way or another. They've hurt me. How can we fix the relationship? And I don't mean fix in a superficial sense. I mean, how can we repair a loving relationship? And become willing to make amends. There's a lot in the spirituality of AA that's about willingness. The how of the 12 Steps program is honesty, openness, and willingness. At least if we get to the situation, the position in which we're willing, we're on the road. And that's in the whole of our spiritual lives as well. May direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. And I came to understand a little bit about how to injure them or others in the early stages of recovery, when listening to a tape about a guy from Australia, I think it was, who was a notorious alcoholic in his day and robbed banks, all kinds of stuff to feed his habit. And when it was coming to step 9, making amends, well, he had none of the money left anyway, so he couldn't give it back. If he went and said to the bank manager, listen, I robbed your bank 20 years ago, he'd be in jail for the next 20 years, and he'd be no support to his family, and so on. And what I'm saying about that is that you can't put your family or anybody else in a position of harm when you're making amends. And it's important for all of us at various stages in our life, but particularly in that type of work, to have a wise mentor. It's important to all of us from time to time to have a wise mentor. And for the young people, hopefully, your best mentor is your parents. I call those 2 steps forgiveness. And what I want to say about forgiveness is about letting go of the hurt, first of all, that we have caused, and secondly, that has been done to us. And 3 things I say that it's important to have on our lips. I love you. I'm sorry. I forgive you. And that needs to be followed up by action in trying, slowly but surely, to change our lives around. Just quickly to go through the last 3 steps. Continue to take more personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. For all of the projects, it's important from time to time to sit down and say, listen, how are we doing? Keep taking the inventory. Are the things that are working, are the things that are not? If the things that are not working, throw them out. If there are things that are working well, let's keep them and build on them. Continue to take moral inventory. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him. Praying only for ourselves, for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry it out. God's will. God's will. Not my will. God's will. Very important. God's will. We're all somehow infected with the disease of our own ego and promoting our own will. It's important that we give space at least to be willing to do God's will. And finally, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all of our affairs. So we try to practice what we've learned. So to summarize, really, the first part of the recovery program of the 12 steps is about building the foundation, 3-legged stool. The next step is about getting into action and taking inventory and seeing what we have to do to improve our own situation. And then we need to have a regime of solid maintenance, which is the last of the 3 steps. Continually taking moral inventory, improving on a daily basis our conscious contact with God, and trying to practice these principles in all our affairs, in all of our parish groups, however best we can. What specifically our tradition has to offer us is to come to the well, to eat the bread, to drink the cup, to celebrate the sacrament of reconciliation humbly, to get down on our knees every day and say, your will, not mine, be done. Thank you, and I wish you well in all your projects.